Good evening, and welcome back. Wherever you are right now, whether you are lying in a darkened room with a window cracked or sitting somewhere quiet while the rest of the house breathes slowly around you, I'm glad you came. Tell me, if you have a moment, where you are listening from. I always wonder. Drop it in the comments if you feel like it, or just hold on to it privately. Either way, tonight we're going somewhere very old. Older than Greece, older than Egypt if we are counting the stories. Tonight we are going to Mesopotamia, to the flat, river-threaded plains between the Tigris and Euphrates, to a city called Uruk, and to a man who was 2/3 God and 1/3 something we still have not quite named. A man named Gilgamesh, who walked the earth before walking the earth, had a name, and who came back from the edge of the world carrying nothing except the knowledge of what waited there. This is not a short story. It was never meant to be. Before there was story, there was water. This is the thing the ancient Mesopotamians agreed on almost universally. Not the shape of the gods, not the hierarchy of heaven, but the fact that in the beginning there was water, two kinds of water, and they were people. Apsu was the sweet water, the fresh water that came up through the ground, the water of rivers and springs, the water that tasted clean when you cupped it in your hands. And Tiamat was the salt water, vast, oceanic, unmeasured, the great roaring body that pressed against the edges of the world and held everything inside itself without particularly caring what it held. They were husband and wife in the way that weather systems are married, meaning they mingled, and from their mingling things were made. Their waters mix. The word in Sumerian is something like a confluence, a murmuring, a place where currents meet and slow. And from that mixing came the first gods. First Lamu and Lahamu, whose names we barely understand anymore. Then Ansha and Kishar, who were the horizons, the places where sky met ground in each direction. And then Anu, who was heaven itself, and Nudimud, who was Ea, who was Enki, a god of such slippery intelligence that he appears in almost every subsequent story wearing a slightly different face. The older gods did not know how to be quiet. This matters. The younger gods, Anu and Enki, and the ones who came with them, they were energetic in the way that young things are energetic. They moved through the body of the primordial world. They danced, some texts say, though the word probably means something more like organized and rhythmic motion rather than what we picture. They made noise. They disrupted the deep waters. Apsu, the sweet water, the father, lay beneath the world trying to rest, and found that he could not rest because these younger gods were always moving, always generating, always making the kind of low vibration that prevented sleep. He brought his complaints to Tiamat. He said, "I cannot sleep. Their noise disturbs me. I want to destroy them." Tiamat told him to be patient. She was, in some of the older tellings, genuinely reluctant. She had made these children, or had participated in making them, and the idea of destruction sat uneasily. She said, essentially, "Wait, let us not do something we cannot undo." But Apsu did not wait. He gathered his vizier, a figure named Mummu, whose name might mean something like the roar of ocean waves or the formless noise of beginnings, and together they made plans. They were going to kill the younger gods. They were going to return everything to silence. Enki found out first. He was always finding things out first. There are texts that describe him as a figure who listened carefully to the water. who moved through information the way water moves through ground, quietly, everywhere, without announcing itself. He heard the plan, he considered it, and then, rather than warning the gods and staging some kind of defense, he did something more elegant and more ruthless. He composed a spell. He cast it over Apsu, and Apsu fell into a deep sleep. The sleep Apsu had been wanting all along, the sleep that his own children's noise had denied him. And in that sleep, Enki killed him. He built his temple over the body of the first father. He built the Apsu, his house, the sacred storehouse of deep water wisdom, directly on top of the sleeping, slaughtered form of the sweet water himself. This is the founding act of the world as Mesopotamian cosmology understood it. Not a loving creation, a coup, a preemptive strike by the god of intelligence against the god of rest, the young and clever against the old and tired. Enki took the tablets of destiny from around Apsu's neck. Some versions placed them there and kept them for a while, knowing they would be needed. Tiamat grieved. She grieved the way oceans grieve, which is to say, she stirred. She did not grieve quietly. Something hardened in her. The reluctance that had made her counsel patience turned into its opposite, and she gathered to herself everything that had been left behind, everything formless and dangerous that lived in the deep waters, the monsters of the primordial sea, the serpent, the dragon, the Lahamu monster, the great lion, the mad dog, the scorpion man, the howling storm, the fish man, the bull man, 11 of them in various tellings. A terrible army drawn from the stuff of the world before the world had organized itself into anything recognizable. And she elevated a god named Kingu to lead them. She gave him the tablets of destiny, which she had taken back from Apsu's body. She put them on his chest like armor. She said, "Your word shall prevail. The command you give shall be supreme. This is war, Tiamat's war, the great counterattack of the unformed world against everything that had been organized and named and given shape." The younger gods panicked. Anu tried to approach Tiamat and turned back. Ea tried and also turned back. There are versions of the text where each god stands before the vast oceanic form of Tiamat and simply cannot speak, cannot act, stands frozen before the sheer scale of the original chaos that had made them all. It was a council. There was a great deal of fear in the room. And then someone said the name Marduk. Marduk was Enki's son. He was enormous, even among gods. 4 eyes, 4 ears, lips that moved fire when he spoke. A figure so brightly lit that the other gods had to look away. He was the god of Babylon, the patron of the city that would become the center of the world. And he had a particular relationship with wind. He said, "I will fight Tiamat. But I have a condition. If I win, I want authority. Real authority. Supreme authority. I want to be foremost among you. I want the tablets of destiny. I want to decide the fates." The gods agreed. There was a feast, a banquet in the epic called the Enuma Elish, where the gods ate bread and drank beer, and in their joy gave Marduk what he asked for, and then they gave him something more. They tested him. They placed a garment in the center of the circle and told him to destroy it with words. He spoke, and it was gone. He spoke again, and it returned. The gods were satisfied. He was real. His power was real. The battle was not quick, and it was not clean. Marduk took winds with him. The 4 winds, the 7 winds, the evil wind, the whirlwind, the hurricane. He took a net so large it could encompass the sky. He took a weapon called Imhulu, which seems to mean something like the evil wind, a weapon made of pure meteorological violence. He faced Tiamat across the dark water, and she opened her mouth to swallow him, and he drove the evil wind into her open mouth so that she could not close it, and her belly filled, and she became distended, and in that moment of distension, he drove his spear through her and split her in half. From her body, he made the world. This is the thing. This is the central act from which all Mesopotamian cosmology proceeds. Her upper half became the sky. Her lower half became the earth. Her eyes became the sources of the Tigris and the Euphrates. Her tail he bent upward to become the band of the Milky Way. Her spittle became clouds. Her tears became rain. Her breasts, this is in the text, became mountains. He stretched her out, and everything we live inside is her skin. Kingu he killed separately, and from Kingu's blood he made human beings. This is worth sitting with for a moment. The blood used to create humanity was the blood of the rebel general, the blood of the god who had been elevated by the primordial mother specifically to make war against order. Human beings, in this telling, are made from mutiny, from the blood of the one who said no to the organized world. There is something in that I find I cannot quite shake, even though I am not sure it is the point the Babylonian priests intended. Marduk organized the stars, built the great calendar, assigned the gods to their stations. He was satisfied. He was supreme. The tablets of destiny hung on his chest now, and the world had a shape. But Uruk did not exist yet. Gilgamesh did not exist yet. And between the world's creation and the world's first hero, something happened to humanity that set the terms for everything that came after. The gods, having created human beings to do the labor they found tedious, the digging of canals, the maintenance of temples, the plowing and planting and harvesting, found after some time that humanity had multiplied. The noise of human beings was enormous. The texts say the earth roared. They say Enlil could not sleep. We have been here before. The echo of Apsu's complaint moves through the centuries like a wave. Too much noise, too much life, too much generation. Enlil brought his complaints to the council, and the council agreed, more or less, to reduce humanity through plague, through drought, through famine. Each time a wise man named Atrahasis, his name means something like exceedingly wise, intervened, following the advice of Enki, who could not bring himself to let humanity be destroyed, who whispered instructions through walls and reed fences because he was technically bound by the council's decision, but found ways around it. The gods tried, flood last, the great flood. Enki whispered the plan to Atrahasis through a reed fence, literally told the reed wall what was coming, and Atrahasis happened to be on the other side. Build a boat, seal it with pitch, take your family, take animals. The flood came. The flood was total. The texts describe the gods themselves, cringing before what they had made, pressing themselves against the walls of heaven, weeping at the devastation. Even Enlil, when the flood receded and the boat came to rest, and Atrahasis emerged and made sacrifices, and the gods smelled the smoke of the offering and gathered around it like flies. Even Enlil was moved. He was also furious at Enki's betrayal, but he was moved. Atrahasis was given immortality. He and his wife were placed at the mouth of the rivers, at the far end of the world, beyond the waters of death, in a place called Dilmun that was green and quiet and outside of time. He was preserved. But humanity's relationship with the divine had changed. The gods, going forward, would limit human lifespan. They would install a demon named Lamashtu among women in childbirth to ensure that some children did not survive. The noise would be managed. The contract between gods and people was not a generous one. You live, you work, you die. The gods eat the smoke of your sacrifices, and in return, do not flood everything. This is the world Gilgamesh was born into. Now, Gilgamesh. He was the king of Uruk, which was real. Archaeologists have found the city, have found the massive walls, have found evidence of a king in the correct period whose name matches. And he was, the texts say, 2/3 divine and 1/3 mortal. And the proportions are strange enough that scholars have spent centuries arguing about what exactly they mean. His mother was Ninsun, a goddess sometimes called the wild cow, a figure associated with the deep wisdom of cattle and with a certain kind of fierce maternal intelligence. His father was Lugobanda, a deified king, a hero himself, someone whose exploits in the mountains to the east appear in an older cycle of texts that sits slightly outside the Gilgamesh story, but casts a shadow over it. Gilgamesh was born into divinity. He was shaped, one of the older poems says, with a divine hand, his body perfected, his beauty overwhelming, his strength without ceiling. He was a terrible king. This is important. The epic does not begin with a wise ruler. It begins with a problem. Gilgamesh was using his divine body and his overwhelming strength in ways that exhausted and terrified Uruk. He did not stop. He required of the young men of Uruk that they keep pace with him, that they match his endurance in the games and the races and the wrestling, and none of them could, and he did not stop when they could not keep up. He took women on the eve of their weddings. He exercised a kind of royal prerogative that left the city raw with resentment and grief. The people of Uruk brought their complaint to the gods. They said, Gilgamesh is too much, too loud, too powerful, too alive. Something like a mirror of Apsu's complaint returns again. The unbearable vitality of the young, the noise of excess energy, the way that too much can be a violence. The gods heard the complaint, and they made a decision. They would create a companion for Gilgamesh, someone his equal, someone who could absorb his excess energy, who could turn his force back on itself and produce from that collision something useful. They sent Aruru, the mother goddess, the one who had participated in creating humanity, and she pinched off a piece of clay and spat on it and threw it into the wilderness, and from that clay and spit came Enkidu, the wild man, the one who ran with animals. Enkidu did not know he was a person at first. He drank with the gazelles at the watering hole. He moved with the herds. He pulled up the traps that hunters set. A trapper found him. This trapper, whose name we never know, who is only ever the trapper, a man who spent his days at the watering hole watching for game and found instead this enormous wild being who destroyed everything he said. The trapper went to his father, and his father said, "Go to Uruk, tell the king. The king will send a temple woman, a priestess, and she will civilize this wild man." The priestess was Shamhat. She went to the watering hole with the trapper. and she waited 3 days. And on the third day, Enkidu came, and she laid down her robe, and she gave herself to him, and he lay with her for 6 days and 7 nights. And when it was finished, the gazelles ran from him, and the wild animals shied away. He had been changed. He had entered through the body of Shamhat into the world of human experience, human pleasure, human language. He could not go back to the animals. The wildness had not left him, but it had been joined by something else. He was grief-stricken, the text says, when he realized the animals would no longer come near him. But Shamhat said to him, "You are beautiful. You are like a god. Why would you run with animals? Come, I will take you to Uruk. There is a man there you need to meet." The meeting between Gilgamesh and Enkidu is one of the great scenes in ancient literature, and it is not gentle. Gilgamesh had dreamed of Enkidu before Enkidu arrived. He dreamed of a star falling from heaven, and he embraced it and could not lift it, and his mother Ninsun told him, "This star is a friend, a companion, one who will not abandon you." He dreamed of an axe, massive and strange, laid in the street of Uruk, and again he loved it and embraced it. Ninsun said the same. "A companion is coming. He is your equal." Enkidu arrived in the city during a festival. Gilgamesh was preparing, the text suggests, to exercise his royal prerogative over a bride. Enkidu stepped into the doorway and blocked the path. They stared at each other, and then they fought. They fought in the streets of Uruk, grappling, slamming against the walls of houses, and the walls shook. They fought until they were panting, until they had stopped, and they stood apart and looked at each other, and something, some mutual recognition, some understanding of what the other one was, passed between them, and they embraced. They wept. They became brothers. It is important that the epic records the weeping, that it does not skip past it in embarrassment. Two enormous, powerful, violent men standing in a broken street, crying. That is the friendship. They decided almost immediately to do something dangerous. This is the nature of their friendship. The joining of two tremendous forces produces not stillness, but acceleration. Gilgamesh wanted to go to the cedar forest. The cedar forest in the east. Modern scholars think it may refer to the forests of Lebanon, or possibly regions further east. But the mythological geography is not the geography of maps. The cedar forest was vast and ancient, and it was guarded by a monster, placed there by the god Enlil himself. The monster's name was Humbaba. Humbaba was old. Humbaba was made of the forest's own voice. His roar was a flood. His mouth was fire. His breath was death. He had 7 layers of terrifying radiance. He had been appointed by Enlil as the guardian of the cedar grove, precisely because cedar was sacred, and the forest was a place that belonged to the gods and not to people. Enkidu had heard of Humbaba. Enkidu was afraid. Gilgamesh was afraid too, though he did not say so immediately. What he said first was, "Only the gods live forever, and the days of men are numbered, and all that we do is wind. So why not do something that will be remembered?" The famous lines, the lines that will echo through everything that comes after. He said, "Let us make a name that endures. Let us go to the cedar forest and cut the great cedar and bring back glory and drive out the evil from the land." This is the first encounter with the problem that will not be solved. Not in this adventure, not in the one after. Gilgamesh knows already at the beginning of the story that he will die. He knows this, and he cannot make peace with it. The adventure to the cedar forest is not really about the cedar. It is about doing something large enough to feel like more than mortal. It is about the oldest of human displacements. If I cannot live forever, let my name. Ninsun prayed. She climbed to the roof of her temple in the morning and raised her arms to the sun, god Shamash, and asked him to protect her son. She performed the ritual. She wept, which is also ritual, but also perhaps sincere. She adopted Enkidu into her care, formally, by placing a pendant around his neck. He was her son too now, in the way that godmothers can make things so. They went to the cedar forest. I should say something here about the journey, which takes several days in the text and involves a series of 6-day marches and Gilgamesh receiving 5 or 6 dreams at each stop, and Enkidu interpreting those dreams, always interpreting them positively, always finding in the terrifying visions a message of coming triumph, even when the dreams are clearly nightmares about being crushed by mountains or struck by lightning. Whether Enkidu believes his own interpretations or whether he is managing Gilgamesh's terror, the text does not say. There is something that reads, to me anyway, like the specific patience of a friend who understands that the other person cannot afford to be afraid right now. And so you say, no. The mountain that collapsed means we will succeed, and you hope you are right. They reached the forest. Humbaba sensed them. He came toward them through the trees. Humbaba was terrible. The text piles up its descriptions and still falls short. He looked like the face of a lion. His voice was a flood. He had the radiance of the killing sun. He spoke to Gilgamesh. He was not purely animalistic. He could speak, and he said, I will bite through your throat. I will leave your corpse for the carrion bird, you fool. Who taught you to do this? And Gilgamesh faltered. Gilgamesh's legs became still, and his feet stopped moving, and the word used is sometimes translated as frozen, sometimes as struck. And Enkidu said to him, don't stop. Forward. Fight. They fought. Shamash sent his great winds. 13 winds, the text says, north wind and south wind and east wind and west wind and the storm wind and the blasting wind and the evil wind. And Humbaba could not move, and Gilgamesh struck him, and Humbaba fell. Humbaba, on his knees, looked up at Gilgamesh and began to plead. He said, let me live. I will be your servant. I will cut the trees for you. I will build you a palace. I will serve you in any way you want. Let me live. Enkidu said, kill him. Gilgamesh hesitated. Gilgamesh looked at Humbaba, kneeling in the dirt, and felt something. The text does not name it, and different translators have called it pity or doubt or mercy or hesitation, but something moved in him that was not the will to complete the killing. And Enkidu said again, before the great god Enlil hears of this and forbids it, before the moment passes, kill him. Don't let him go back into the forest. Gilgamesh cut off Humbaba's head. The cedar fell, the trees fell. The forest, that ancient guarded god-assigned place, was opened. They made a great door from the tallest cedar, a door for the temple at Nippur, and they floated it down the Euphrates. They were triumphant. They had done it. They had made a name, and Enlil was furious. The text recorded briefly. Enlil's rage at the destruction of his cedar forest, at the killing of Humbaba, whom he had placed there. And it is important. The victory has offended heaven. The making of a name has cost something that will be collected later. There is also Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, the great Inanna of the older Sumerian tradition, the star of morning and evening, the keeper of the great me, the civilizational arts and powers. Ishtar looked at Gilgamesh, returning from the cedar forest, sweating and triumphant and probably bleeding, and she wanted him. She made him an offer. She said, "Come be my husband. I will give you a chariot of gold and lapis lazuli. I will give you a palace. Kings will kiss your feet. Your goats will give triplets. Your sheep will twin. Come, Gilgamesh." He said no. He said no in a speech that is remarkable in ancient literature for its ferocity and its specificity. He listed her previous lovers. He named each one and what had happened to them. Tammuz, her first lover, who was now in the underworld, weeping every year. The bright-colored bird, whose wings she broke. The lion, perfect in strength, whose pit she dug. The horse, glorious in war, for whom she decreed the whip and the spur and the drinking of muddy water. The shepherd, who made bread and offered it to her, who she turned into a wolf. Her own father's gardener, Ishulanu, who brought her day clusters every day and whom she struck with her own hands so that his arms could no longer move. He said, "And now, you want me to be one of these?" No, it was an accurate speech. It was also a foolish one. Ishtar went to her father Anu in heaven and wept and said, "Gilgamesh has insulted me. He named my shames. He listed my failures. She asked for the bull of heaven. Anu warned her, "If I give you the bull of heaven, Uruk will know 7 years of empty wind, 7 years of drought, the husks in the fields." She said, "I prepared for this. I stored grain. Give me the bull." The bull of heaven came down to earth. Each time it snorted, it opened a pit and 300 warriors fell into the pit. On the third snort, a pit opened at Enkidu's feet, and Enkidu fell to his waist and pulled himself out and seized the bull by the horns. He held the bull. He shouted to Gilgamesh, "Thrust your sword between the neck and the horns." Gilgamesh did. The bull fell. They tore out the bull's heart and offered it to Shamash. Ishtar stood on the walls of Uruk and screamed. Enkidu tore out the bull's right thigh and threw it in her face. He said, "If I could get my hands on you, I would do this to you too. I would drape your arms in its guts." That night they washed their hands in the Euphrates and walked the streets of Uruk, and the people came out of their houses and stared and said, "Who is the finest among men? Who is the most glorious among heroes?" And they answered their own question. Gilgamesh is the finest. Enkidu is glorious. 2 men and a city between them, and the night was warm. Let me collect the thread here for a moment, because this is where the story changes, and I want to make sure I bring you with me. Everything so far has been victory. Gilgamesh and Enkidu have gone from combat to friendship to monster slaying to divine bull slaying, and each step has been upward, outward, a making of name and a proving of force. The text has let them have this. It has been generous, but heaven is not finished with them. And you already know, if you have been listening, that the debt incurred at Humbaba's death has not been settled. Enkidu had a dream. The gods convened. Anu, Enlil, Ea, Shamash, and they said, "One of them must die for what they have done, for the killing of Humbaba, for the killing of the bull of heaven." Anu said to Enlil, "Since they have killed the bull of heaven and killed Humbaba, the one who stripped the pines from the mountains, one of them must die." And Enlil said, "Enkidu must die, not Gilgamesh." Enkidu dreamed it first. He dreamed a great bird, dark-faced with lion paws, caught him and carried him down to the house of dust, the underworld, where the dead eat clay and wear feathers, where all the kings sit in darkness and the high priests are servants. He woke and told Gilgamesh the dream, and he was afraid. He was also angry. He cursed the trapper who had first seen him at the watering hole. He cursed Shamhat, the priestess who had taken him from the animals and brought him into the human world. He cursed her in terms so vivid and specific that Shamash had to appear in the sky and rebuke him and say, "Wait, think about what you had because of her. Gilgamesh, your brother, the great city, the fine bed, the clothing, the food. Think." And Enkidu stopped cursing Shamhat and blessed her instead. He fell ill. He lay in bed. He lay in bed for 12 days, which in the text are described one by one. On the first day he arose and spoke. On the second day he spoke, the days accumulating like weight. And Gilgamesh sat beside him and held his hand. And the text does not skip the illness, does not rush past it. It makes you sit in the room. On the 13th day, some versions say the 12th, Enkidu died. The death of Enkidu is the center of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Not the cedar forest, not the bull of heaven, not the search for immortality that comes after. This is what the story was building toward. The death of the only person who was Gilgamesh's equal, the death that showed Gilgamesh what mortality actually was, not as a concept to argue over while preparing for heroic adventure, but as a reality happening in a room to a body he knew. Gilgamesh went mad with grief. The texts describe it in ways that are, I find this hard to describe precisely, ways that feel urgent in a manner that ancient texts do not always manage. Gilgamesh tore at his hair. He tore his fine clothing. He refused to let the body be buried for 7 days and 7 nights, waiting, the text implies, for Enkidu to wake up, until a worm dropped from Enkidu's nostril. Then he understood. Then he could not. He commissioned a great statue of Enkidu. He ordered it built in precious materials, gold for the chest, lapis lazuli for the throat, silver for the hair, and the skin of some valued stone. He gave gifts to all the craftsmen and all the gods, the offerings required when a great man dies, and all of this is recorded in the text with a grief that accumulates, that does not diminish even as the ritual actions accumulate. He left Uruk. He went out into the wilderness. He walked away from the city. He said, "I will die too, and I'm afraid." This is the change. This is the thing that Enkidu's death did that the cedar forest and the bull of heaven could not do. Gilgamesh had known intellectually that he would die. He had said so himself before they went to the cedar forest. Only the gods live forever. The days of men are numbered. He had known it, but he had known it the way that you know things when they are happening to other people, or to no one yet, or to an idea rather than a body. Now the body was Enkidu's body, and the knowing was different. Now he was afraid with the whole of himself. He went looking for Utnapishtim. Anyway, Utnapishtim was the man who survived the flood. The Atrahasis figure, renamed, resituated, the only human being who had been given immortality by the gods, the one who lived at the mouth of the rivers at the far end of the world. Gilgamesh thought, if he has immortality, he has the secret of it. He can tell me how to get it. He walked into the wilderness, and he walked and he killed lions because they frightened him in the night, not heroically, not for glory, just killing them because they were there and they were dangerous and he had to keep moving. He came to the mountains called Mashu, twin peaks, the mountains where the sun rises and sets, whose roots go down to the underworld and whose peaks hold up the sky. They were guarded by scorpion people, creatures whose radiance was death to look at. The scorpion man and his wife looked at Gilgamesh coming across the desert, and the wife said, "This one is 2/3 divine." The scorpion man agreed. He said to Gilgamesh, "No mortal has passed through these mountains. The path inside is 12 leagues of absolute darkness. No light, nothing." But Gilgamesh said, "I am going. I have lost Enkidu, and I am looking for Utnapishtim, and I will not stop." They let him pass. He went into the mountain tunnel. The text counts the leagues. At 1 league, the darkness is dense. At 2 leagues, there is no light, and so on, counting down toward a far end that seems like it will never come, until finally he ran and came out the other side into a garden by the sea, a garden where the trees bore gemstones instead of fruit, carnelian and lapis lazuli. The sun god Shamash saw him walking among the gem trees and was troubled. He said, "Gilgamesh, where are you going? The life you seek you will not find. When the gods created humanity, they assigned death to humanity and kept life for themselves. Let the food be full. Let the day be glad. Let the woman you love be joyful in your arms. Look at the child who holds your hand. Let the living be glad. This is the task of humanity." Gilgamesh heard these words. He did not stop. He came to a tavern at the edge of the Sea of Death, run by a woman named Siduri. Siduri looked at him coming, and she locked her gates and climbed up on her wall. He looked terrible. He had been in the wilderness for months. His clothing was animal skin. He had been crying. He was gaunt. She called down to him, "Why do you look like this?" He told her everything. He told her about Enkidu and about his fear. She gave him the same speech that Shamash had given, essentially the same speech, the speech that the epic seems to want him to hear more than once, the speech that says, "You will not find what you are looking for, so eat bread and drink beer and love your wife and let your children run in the sun." He did not stop. She told him about Urshanabi. Urshanabi was the ferryman. He worked the Sea of Death. He was the only crossing. Gilgamesh found him. This is a somewhat strange moment. In the text, the different versions handle differently. But in some versions, Gilgamesh, in his grief and frustration, destroys the stone things, which are possibly sacred objects associated with Urshanabi's boat, which are the things that allow the boat to cross the waters of death without the oarsman himself touching the water. And Urshanabi told Gilgamesh, "Because you destroyed the stone things, we will need 300 punting poles. Cut them." Gilgamesh cut them. He cut 300 punting poles, each 60 cubits long, and they set out across the Sea of Death. And each time a pole touched the water of death, Gilgamesh dropped it, and used another, and they crossed with exactly 300 poles. Arriving at the far shore, he found Utnapishtim. I need to pause here, because this is the meeting Gilgamesh has been building toward for the entire second half of the epic, and what happens in it is not what you expect. Or maybe it is exactly what you expect, and that is the point. Utnapishtim looked at Gilgamesh and gave him the same speech. The same speech, again, for the third time, more or less. You look terrible. You will not find eternal life. You are chasing something the gods do not offer. You should go home. Gilgamesh said, but you have immortality. You have it. How? Explain it to me. And Utnapishtim told him the flood story. He told him the whole thing. The Council of Gods, Enlil's plan, Ear's whispered warning through the reed wall, the building of the boat, the animals, the darkness of the flood, the 7 days and 7 nights, the mountain, the birds sent out to find dry land, the return of the dove, then the swallow, then the raven who flew and circled and did not come back, the disembarkment and the sacrifice. And then Utnapishtim said, and Enlil came and was angry, and Ea spoke to Enlil, and Enlil made me immortal and put me here, at the mouth of the rivers, beyond the world. Gilgamesh said, and what do I do? Utnapishtim said, I will give you a test. Do not sleep for 6 days and 7 nights. If you can do that, if you can conquer the lesser death, the daily death, then perhaps we can talk about the greater one. Gilgamesh sat down and fell immediately asleep. He slept for 7 days. Utnapishtim watched him sleep and told his wife to bake a loaf of bread each day and mark it, to prove to Gilgamesh when he woke up that he had not merely dozed. The loaves piled up, 1 beginning to mold, 2 leather, 3 waterlogged, 4 going white, 5 going grey, 6 stale, 7 fresh, 7 loaves, 7 days, the proof of the first failure. Gilgamesh woke and said, I only dozed for a moment. Utnapishtim showed him the loaves. Gilgamesh wept. There was a plant. This is the last thing, a plant at the bottom of the sea of death, growing in the deep water, a plant with thorns that would cut you as you gathered it. And its name meant something like, the old man becomes young again, or the heart of old man grows young. Utnapishtim's wife persuaded her husband to tell Gilgamesh about it. And he did. And Gilgamesh tied stones to his feet and dived down to the bottom and cut the plant and came back up with his hands bleeding from the thorns. And he held the plant and he was happy. He said, I will take this back to Uruk and test it on an old man, and then I will take it myself and be young again. I will not eat it yet. I will wait and share it. On the way back, he stopped at a cool pool to bathe, and a serpent smelled the fragrance of the plant and came up from the deep water and took it, just like that, while Gilgamesh was bathing. The serpent took the plant and slithered back down into the water and shed its skin. Gilgamesh sat down beside the pool and wept. He said, For what have I labored? For what has my blood been spent? I did nothing useful for myself. I served only the lion of the ground. He went back to Uruk. He went home. The epic ends with Gilgamesh bringing Ur-Shanabi to the walls of the city and telling him to look. Look at the walls. Look at the stonework. Look at the temple. Look at the foundation terrace, which no one can match. Look at the threshold of brick, which has stood since ancient times. Look at the tablet box of cedar. Open the lid. Open the bronze lock. Look at the tablet of lapis lazuli. Read it. Read the story of everything Gilgamesh suffered, everything he accomplished, everything he saw. The walls are the monument. The city is the immortality. The story told on the lapis lazuli tablet is the life that persists after life. There are other figures who gather around the story of Gilgamesh, the way lesser stars gather around a primary, not lesser in themselves, but lit partly by the gravity of the central narrative. I want to stay with a few of them because they are not decoration. They are the story's argument, worked out through different bodies. Enkidu first, but Enkidu already lives in everything I have said, so let me stay just a moment longer with what happens to him after death, because the underworld tradition is not silent on this. There is a Sumerian poem older than the standard Babylonian version of the epic, sometimes appended to the end of the great tablets, called Gilgamesh and the Netherworld, or Gilgamesh, Enkidu and the Netherworld, in which Enkidu goes down to the underworld on an errand for Gilgamesh to retrieve a sacred ball and mallet that have fallen through a hole into the earth. And he does not come back. He is trapped in the house of dust. Gilgamesh mourns. He goes to every god in turn, and each one says, "Nothing can be done." Until Enki, always Enki, finds a crack in the earth and allows Enkidu's ghost to rise up briefly, like a vapor, like a dream. The two friends sit together. Gilgamesh asks, "What is it like? Tell me what it is like down there." And Enkidu tells him. He describes the dead in categories: the man who had one son, the man who had 7 sons, the young man who died without an heir, the woman who died in childbirth, the man who fell in battle. Each category receives a kind of brief, measured fate. The man with 7 sons sits on a throne near the gods, near the best place. The man who had no one weeps in the corner. Gilgamesh wept. This is not a consolation. It is an accounting. Tiamat deserves a longer consideration than she usually gets. She is not a minor figure. She is the instrument by which the second principal force in the epic enters civilization. She is the hinge between the wild world and the human one. There is a tendency in some readings to treat her as a function rather than a person, as the sex that civilizes rather than as someone who makes a decision and acts on it. But the text gives her words. It gives her the specific gesture of spreading her robe. It gives her the 7 days and 7 nights, which is ritual time, sacred time, the same duration used elsewhere in the epic for significant transformations. It gives her the blessing that replaces the curse when Enkidu reconsiders. She is his mother in some sense, his introducer, the one who gave him language and bread and clothing and the possibility of friendship. She goes back to Uruk before him and prepares the way. She is doing work the whole time. Ninsun is the figure I find I have lingered on more than I expected to when I started thinking about this narrative. The wild cow, the goddess who is also a mother. She appears at 2 crucial moments: when she interprets Gilgamesh's dreams of the meteor and the axe, and when she prays on the roof for his safety before the Cedar Forest expedition. Both times, she is not passive. She is not wringing her hands and hoping. She is engaged in active theological intervention. When she adopts Enkidu, formally and ritually, she is doing something with structural consequences. She is creating a kinship bond that makes the friendship official, that brings Enkidu under the protection of her divine concern. She is the one who knows before anyone else what the dreams mean. She looks at the star that fell from heaven and the axe in the street, and she says, "A friend is coming, and you will love him the way you love a woman." The simile is in the text. She uses it without apparent concern. She is making her son a promise. Siduri, the tavern keeper at the edge of the Sea of Death, is in the story for only a short time. She is locked behind her gate. She calls down from her wall, and she is afraid. Then she talks to him. Then she gives him the speech about bread and beer and wives and children. Her speech is so well articulated, so rhythmically complete, that scholars have argued it was once a longer poem, a carpe diem meditation, a wisdom text in its own right, embedded in the epic at this point. Some versions of the text are damaged here, and we lose her. In the most complete version, she survives just long enough to send Gilgamesh to Urshanabi. She is the last human voice before the waters of death. She is the one who says, "Living is enough if you do it right." And she disappears from the story, having said her piece, which is exactly what a very wise minor character does. Utnapishtim is the great anticlimax, and I mean this in the best possible way. He is what Gilgamesh is looking for. He has the thing Gilgamesh wants. And when Gilgamesh reaches him, he is an old man sitting at the edge of the world doing nothing in particular, and his advice is identical to everyone else's advice. Eat, drink, love your wife, let your children run. And his immortality turns out not to be a technique that can be transferred. It was a gift given in a unique moment by gods who are sorry and ashamed and willing to make an exception, and the exception cannot be repeated. Utnapishtim does not say this cruelly. He says it almost gently. He says, "Tell me, Gilgamesh, do you think any of your companions from the old days will live forever? Has any lord stood fast forever? What was fixed long ago? Tell me." He is not mocking. He is asking genuinely. He has had a long time to think about these questions. The failed test, the not sleeping, is one of the most honest moments in ancient epic literature. Gilgamesh sits down to prove he can conquer sleep and immediately falls asleep. There is no way to read this passage and feel that the text is being unkind to him. It is being accurate. Human beings sleep. Human beings cannot stay awake for 7 days. The gods designed it that way, the same way they designed the shortness of life. Gilgamesh is not weak for sleeping. He is human. The plant at the bottom of the sea is the last gift, the last chance, and it is taken by a snake, a creature associated in Mesopotamian tradition with rejuvenation, precisely because it sheds its skin and emerges renewed. The snake takes the gift of youth and uses it the way snakes do, and Gilgamesh loses even this, which was never more than a hope anyway. It is a cruel scene. It is also a funny scene in a very dark way, the kind of cosmic joke that literature allows itself when it has been serious for a very long time. He bathed. He put down the plant for a moment. He trusted that the bottom of the sea is a safe place to leave something precious. He was wrong. The universe offers no guarantees about unattended plants. Now I need to talk about what this story is doing with time, because the epic is not merely a sequence of events, but a theory of human experience across ages. The world of the epic begins in the time before humanity, proceeds through the creation of humanity and the establishment of civilization, passes through a great catastrophic reset with the flood, and arrives at the world of Gilgamesh, which is described in ways that mark it as already post-original, already downstream from whatever the first and best things were. The Great Cedar Forest has already been identified as something that belongs to the gods, not to people. The Sea of Death already exists. The underworld is already full of dead kings sitting on their thrones in darkness. Gilgamesh is born into a world that has already aged significantly from its first form. This is the Mesopotamian version of the falling away narrative, the idea that time moves away from an original fullness toward a diminished present. The Sumerians did not articulate this as explicitly as Hesiod would in his account of the gold, silver, bronze, and iron ages, but the structure is there. The gods who made things in the beginning had powers that are not available now. The flood was a catastrophic intervention that reset the terms of human existence. What came after was different from what came before. Gilgamesh is a hero of the post-flood world, the world of managed mortality and maintained temples, and the relentless human work of agriculture and animal husbandry, the world in which the gods have withdrawn to a more distant position and the gap between divine and human has widened. And yet Gilgamesh is 2/3 divine. He carries the older substance in him, the pre-human vitality, the thing that makes him too much for a mortal city to contain. His problem is not that he is too human. His problem is that he is not human enough, not mortal enough, not resigned enough, not willing to accept the terms of the post-flood contract. He pushes against the limits of the contract his entire life. He pushes against them in Uruk before Enkidu arrives. Through excess and overreach, he pushes against them in the cedar forest. He pushes against them when he refuses Ishtar. He pushes against them in the wilderness after Enkidu's death, in the long walk toward immortality that occupies the second half of the epic. And every time the universe declines to bend, what the universe does offer him in the end is the walls of Uruk. "Look at them," he says to Ushanabi. "I want you to see them. This is," and here I am not sure, I know exactly how to say what I want to say. "This is either a consolation or a lesson, or both at once. The walls are stone. They will outlast Gilgamesh's body. The story inscribed on the lapis lazuli tablet will outlast Gilgamesh's body. The city will outlast Gilgamesh's body. Whether this is enough, whether it constitutes the kind of permanence Gilgamesh was looking for when he first said, 'Let us make a name that endures.' The text does not tell you. It shows you the walls and invites you to decide. You can read the ending as a man who has found his answer. You can read it as a man who has accepted a lesser answer because the real one was not available. The text supports both readings with the same words. The Sumerian poems that predate the Babylonian consolidation, the 5 separate Gilgamesh poems that survive from roughly the 3rd millennium BCE. The stories of Gilgamesh and the cedar forest, Gilgamesh and the bull of heaven, Gilgamesh and the netherworld, the death of Gilgamesh. Each of them wrestles with the same problem from a different angle. The death of Gilgamesh is particularly worth noting. It is fragmentary. Parts are missing. What survives describes Gilgamesh receiving a divine message in a dream. The gods have decided his fate, and his fate is death. And the text, from what survives, seems to present Gilgamesh accepting this with a kind of terrible dignity. He knows. He has always known. The difference between knowing and accepting is not always the same as the difference between the beginning of a journey and its end. There is something happening in the Mesopotamian tradition with the concept of the me, the divine powers, the civilizational arts, the abstract capacities that make organized human life possible. Inanna stole them from Enki in a famous earlier myth, brought them to Uruk in a boat while Enki sent demons to stop her, and she outran them all. And through this theft, Uruk became what it was, a city with kingship and the descent into the underworld, and the ascent from it, and the scribal arts, and the art of the hero, and the art of music, and the art of the law court, and dozens of other things. All of them capacities that were abstract before they became concrete, powers that existed in Enki's storehouse and needed to be stolen, needed to be forcibly transferred from divine keeping into human practice. Gilgamesh is the king of the city that holds these stolen arts. He is himself, in some sense, a living me, a concentration of divine capacity walking around in mortal flesh, a kind of experiment in what happens when you give a human being divine force without divine exemption from death. The experiment's result is the epic. The result is the most sophisticated exploration of mortality in ancient literature. The result is a text that was read for 2,000 years across the ancient Near East, copied and recopied, translated into multiple languages, found in the libraries of Hittite palaces and Egyptian administrative centers and Assyrian royal collections. It was not read because it was entertaining, though it is. It was read because it was true, because whoever encountered it in the night, in the lamplight, in the scratching of a stylus on wet clay, recognized the problem. I too am going to die, and I too want something that I cannot have. There are elements of the flood episode in Genesis. There are elements of the wild man narrative in stories far removed from Mesopotamia. There are elements of the journey to the end of the world, the crossing of the waters of death, the failed return of immortality that show up in narratives around the planet with such regularity that you begin to suspect the stories are not borrowing from each other, but rather arriving independently at the same human truth from different directions. The truth being, we want to live forever and we cannot, and the confrontation with that fact produces either wisdom or madness, or, in the best cases, both. Something about this story feels modern in ways that are almost uncomfortable. The way the text does not let Gilgamesh be heroic in his grief. He tears his hair. He refuses to release the body. He wanders the wilderness in animal skins weeping. The way it refuses to redeem him with a tidy religious consolation. There is no heaven for Gilgamesh to aspire to, no reunion with Enkidu promised, no divine embrace at the end. The way it shows, with the sleeping test, that the body's needs are not amenable to the will's ambitions. The body sleeps, the body will die. The will has nothing to say about this. And yet, and this is the thing that the epic understands and that some of its readers have missed, the will is not useless. It makes the walls, it makes the story. Gilgamesh builds Uruk. He rules it imperfectly and terribly at first, and then better, and then he goes into the wilderness, and comes back diminished and wiser, and the city is still there, and the walls are still standing, and the story is inscribed on a tablet of lapis lazuli inside a box of cedar, and someone will open it and read it. You opened it, you are reading it anyway. The snake that takes the plant is a figure that appears throughout the ancient Near East in associations with both danger and renewal. The snake that lives in the sea. The snake that sheds its skin and comes back looking like itself, but newer. In one reading, the snake's theft of the plant of eternal youth is a catastrophe. Gilgamesh loses his last chance, his last hope, the thing he bled for at the bottom of the sea. In another reading, the snake shows him something. The snake does what the plant promises. The snake takes the gift and uses it. Life renews itself through the shedding of what has been used up, through the loss of what has aged, through the willingness. Here is where the metaphor turns not quite right, which may be the point. The willingness to slip out of your own skin and emerge without it. Gilgamesh cannot do that. Gilgamesh is attached to himself. He loved Enkidu so completely that when Enkidu's skin stopped working, Gilgamesh could not accept it. The snake is indifferent to attachment. I am not saying the snake is right. I am saying the snake is in the story, and the story put it there deliberately. The Catabasis tradition, the descent into the underworld, is one of the oldest narrative structures we have. Inanna goes down before Gilgamesh. She descends through 7 gates, and at each gate she is stripped of one of her divine powers, one article of clothing or jewelry, until she stands naked and powerless before Ereshkigal, her sister, the queen of the dead, and is killed and hung on a hook. She is rescued eventually, but only by surrendering someone else to take her place, Tammuz, her husband, who is weeping in the underworld for her even before she assigns him there, which the text seems to regard as something she noticed. The descent and the return and the price. Gilgamesh does not make the full descent. He goes to the edge, the waters of death, the mountain tunnel of absolute darkness, but he does not go below. His friend goes below. His friend does not come back, except as a ghost for one brief conversation through a crack in the earth. Maybe this is also part of the story's argument. Some people come back from the edge, some people do not. The ones who come back carry something. Whether what they carry is wisdom or its shadow or merely the memory of what it felt like to be that far from everything familiar, the text leaves this open. Gilgamesh comes back to the walls of Uruk. The walls are still there. He tells Urshanabi to look at them. He is pointing at something. The civilization that produced this text was not a civilization that believed death could be defeated. It was a civilization that believed, that had decided at some point, collectively, that the proper response to death was to build things that lasted longer than a human life. Temples, cities, stories, the great brick walls of Uruk, which were real, which actually existed, which have been partially excavated, were described in ancient texts as things that would outlast their builder, and that were meant to. The founding of Uruk was itself understood as a kind of immortality project, not for the individual king, but for the city, for the civilization, for the accumulated practice of human life organized around grain and temple and calendar and law. Gilgamesh's achievement in the final accounting is not the slaying of Humbaba, though that is remarkable. It is not the killing of the bull of heaven, though that was necessary. It is not even surviving the wilderness and the waters of death, though that required everything he had. His achievement is the city. His achievement is the walls. His achievement is the story inscribed on the tablet that you are reading right now, in the sense that the story of Gilgamesh is still being read, still being translated, still being taught, still generating new versions and retellings and arguments about what it means, more than 4,000 years after the first scribes pressed their wedge-shaped styluses into wet clay and recorded what the singers had been singing. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest major literary text that survives. It is also one of the most psychologically sophisticated. The combination of these two facts is something that scholarship has sometimes struggled with. There is a temptation to treat older as more primitive, to read the text as a forerunner of the Greek epics or the biblical narratives rather than as a complete thing in itself. But Gilgamesh does things that Homer does not do, that the Bible does not do, that later traditions in some ways moved away from rather than toward. It shows a hero weeping. It shows a hero failing. It shows the universe declining to provide consolation and the hero finding a way to live in a universe that declines to console. It shows the friendship between two men as the central relationship of a great work of literature, not the love of a woman, not the relationship between father and son, not the bond between a hero and his god, but the friendship, the peer relationship, the love between equals. This has not gone unremarked. It cannot be unremarked. Gilgamesh loves Enkidu the way you love a woman, says Ninsun, and the text does not flinch from the statement and does not elaborate on it. The mourning for Enkidu is the most elaborate and sustained expression of grief in the ancient Near East. It is possible to read the entire second half of the epic as the work of a man processing the death of someone he loved completely and could not save. The search for immortality is, in this reading, not primarily about fear of his own death, but about the impossibility of accepting Enkidu's death, the impossibility of a world in which Enkidu's body lies still while the sun rises normally and the birds continue their noise and the ferry continues to cross the waters of death, carrying everyone else's dead. The world is full of Gilgameshes. It has always been full of them. People who love someone so thoroughly that the death of that person breaks the world open and reveals something unbearable underneath. People who walk into wilderness in the aftermath of that death because the city is too full of the dead person's absence to be livable. People who come to the edge of the water and are told, living is enough if you do it right. People who cannot hear that advice, not yet, because it is too soon, because the loaves of bread are too fresh, and people who eventually find their way back to the walls of the city they built and stand before those walls and say, look at this, I made this, this will last, the tablet is there, the box of cedar is there, the bronze lock is there, open it, read it. What the Mesopotamian scribes gave us when they pressed this story into clay is not an entertainment, though it entertains. It is not a religious text, though it contains religious content. It is not a historical document, though it refers to a historical person and a historical city. It is a record of a human confrontation with the fact of death, conducted at the very beginning of writing, in the very first city, by a man who was almost a god but not quite, and who had to learn the hard way what not quite meant. Gilgamesh died. The city survived him. The story survived the city. The story is still here. There is something worth holding on to in the image of the tablet inside the box, inside the walls. The story inscribed, preserved, waiting for you specifically across 40 centuries of silence and clay, waiting for the moment when someone would crack the lid and let the light in and read the name of a man who walked on the road of exhaustion, who crossed everything that could be crossed, who came to the end of the world and found an old man sitting at the mouth of a river, doing nothing, asking questions. The old man said, "Has any lord stood fast forever?" The walls of Uruk are still there. In southern Iraq, in the dry land, archaeologists have measured them. 9 kilometers of perimeter, 18 square kilometers enclosed. The oldest city wall on earth, or one of them, built from the same clay that Aruru pinched between her fingers when she made Enkidu, built from the same earth that holds the bones of every Mesopotamian king who ever lived and died and was mourned and forgotten. Gilgamesh built them, or the king named Gilgamesh built them, the historical man behind the myth, the 2/3 mortal, 1/3 divine man who ruled Uruk in the 27th century before the Common Era, give or take, and was remembered as the greatest of all kings so insistently across so many centuries that a city of scribes eventually inscribed his life on 12 tablets of clay and called it the story of him who saw the deep. He who saw the deep. That is the title. Not the greatest warrior, not the best king. The one who went far enough to see what was underneath. That is not a small thing to be called. That is not a small thing to leave behind. 4,000 years later, in a room somewhere, at a particular hour of the night, you heard it. The story found you. The way that great stories find the people who need them. The way that a friend shows up in a dream as a star falling from heaven, as an axe laid in the street. There's something you love before you understand why. Ninsen said, "Do not be afraid of what you love before you understand it. I am saying something I am not sure I have the right to say. That the story of Gilgamesh is not only about a dead man and a dead city and a dead civilization, but about the specific fear and the specific grief that makes us human. And that the specific fear and the specific grief are still here, still ours, still producing the same long walk into the wilderness and the same questions at the edge of the same water and the same answer. Again, in the voice of a tavern keeper who locks her gate and then unlocks it and gives you what she has. Eat the bread, drink the beer, love the people you are with. Let the child hold your hand. You will not live forever. Neither will the child. Love them anyway." Gilgamesh went home. He stood at the walls. He told the ferryman to look. "Good night, wherever you are. Sleep well. The walls are still standing."